Evelyn Reed and Julian Vance were a perfect match, childhood friends from families of equal standing. Their relationship was one of mutual respect, built on a foundation of tangled family interests and what was once love. But that love had soured. For 2 years, they hadn't shared a bed. He often came home late, if at all, instructing the housekeeper not to disturb her as he slept in the guest room. He had found someone else. She tried to maintain the facade of harmony, turning a blind eye. But he grew tired of hiding. A week before their wedding, he laid his cards on the table. He told her he still wanted the marriage. He even said he loved her, but explained that he was like a withered tree, inevitably drawn to a younger Omega who was like rainfall. He suggested she also find someone new, to get from another what he could no longer give. She, of course, did not agree. He clarified that it wasn't a discussion, but a notification. And then he brought his lover home. She saw him then, the young Omega he had described as Rain. His dark eyes were veiled in a night-like mist, with long lashes like seagrass and lips like soft petals. His fingers were pale and slender, like freshly peeled bamboo shoots in spring. The moment she saw him, she felt a subtle stirring beneath her own skin, a sound like something breaking through soil. Julian said his name was Leo. When he introduced the Omega, it was as if he were showing off a treasured possession he had hidden for years. His gaze upon Leo was one of obsession and contentment, tinged with a pride of ownership that made her heart ache. Leo was docile. Cared for meticulously, he had nothing to do. He spoke when Julian told him to and sat without moving wherever he was placed. Evelyn's attitude was far from friendly, but her upbringing prevented her from causing a scene. After Leo left, she kept Julian behind. She stated that he should have ended things with her before allowing Leo into their home. She proposed they break up. He just smiled, unconcerned, saying that Leo would never live there, that he had arranged a luxury apartment for him. He had no intention of breaking up with her. He insisted, claiming no one could replace her. He then reminded her that theirs was a business merger, and they didn't have the final say. Any disruption would cause problems for everyone. On Valentine's Day, Julian booked the city's finest restaurant and hotel to spend the entire day with Leo. Believing he had been transparent with her, he casually asked for her advice on the most popular gifts. Her emotions were steady, her dignity paramount, but she had no intention of helping with his charade. Receiving no answer, Julian acted as if nothing was wrong, bidding her farewell with a wide smile. He showed no remorse. Before he left, he earnestly suggested she go to a party hosted by their mutual friends. Julian was cruel, ignoring her wishes, certain she would prioritize the bigger picture and never leave him. It seemed she had been molded into this person step by step. First, an unfamiliar perfume, then a lipstick stain, a strand of hair, ambiguous texts, intimate photos, a hickey. In the beginning, he would offer excuses. Later, he would just smile in silent admission. After countless bouts of self-doubt, breakdowns, and self-repairs, she thought she had abandoned all illusions, accepting his secrets. But now he couldn't even be bothered to pretend. She was utterly exhausted. She had the driver take her to the law firm. Julian and her, once a match made in heaven. Their bond had been deep, their families' interests intricately woven together. Everyone assumed they would marry. She once believed it too. This led to a portfolio of jointly owned properties with unclear titles and several co-managed companies. Their connection was such that a single move could trigger a cascade of consequences. Now she was determined to draw a line. Unwilling to remain entangled financially, she commissioned her lawyer to draft a separation plan. Stroke by stroke, she signed her name on the agency agreement. Evelyn Reed. Lost for too long, she was ready to find herself again. Leaving the office, she noticed the preserved flowers and a wrapped gift under her lawyer's desk. The lawyer, too, had a Valentine's date. Only she was left behind. Wondering how she had lost her allure, she went to the party. The gathering was at a friend's oceanfront villa in the Hamptons. When she was led inside, she saw a sea of bodies in swimwear, out of season for the cool air but not for the heated pool. Toned thighs, V-lines, and youthful limbs spilled from the water. Unabashed gazes fell upon her, as if she were a piece of beef waiting to be grilled, her origin and quality being judged. But she was just a beta. The stares quickly moved on. As she sat on a sofa chatting with her friend, she noticed a handsome college student. His body was well-built, cheap jeans hugging powerful thighs, a simple white t-shirt failing to hide his broad shoulders and narrow waist. He wasn't in the water, just leaning against a wall, hands in his pockets, observing the lively crowd with a searching, inquisitive gaze, like a stag lost in a decadent forest. As she watched him, his eyes met hers across the room. A few seconds later, he walked through the crowd toward her. He said his name was Caleb Thorne. He asked if she had come with anyone. If not, would she consider spending the evening with him? His advance was direct and fervent. She instinctively refused. Her friend told her not to waste the opportunity and gave Caleb her contact information. Evelyn left after half an hour. Back home, she received a text from Caleb asking her out. After some thought, she sent his number to a private investigator. The agency quickly returned with a background report. She was accustomed to controlling everything within a safe perimeter. She spent a long time in the bathroom, sitting in the tub, tracing the lines of her own body. It was soft, clean, barren, and thin. Her fingers sank deep into the flesh, revealing a weak, lifeless hollowness. She went on the date. Caleb had chosen a high-end steakhouse. He had slicked back his hair and wore a suit, clearly dressed up for a place he didn't frequent. He occasionally tugged at his collar, trying to ease the discomfort of the formal attire. But he pulled out her chair, asked about her preferences and dietary restrictions, his manner impeccably gentlemanly. The restaurant was notoriously difficult to book, which was why he had chosen it. But she was a black card member there. She knew the price of the dishes the waiter presented, a sum he could not easily afford. She looked into his eyes. They were deep and clear, like mountain springs, like a galaxy, like a pair of blue gems that refracted light into dreams. He was of mixed heritage, he said when she asked. His mother was Finnish. He had a Western bone structure softened by Eastern features. His thick brows were distinct, his lashes long, and his skin so fine she couldn't find a single pore. It was then she realized how truly handsome he was, like a figure from an oil painting. Inevitably, she thought of Leo. She felt Caleb was like him, born to be loved, a masterpiece carved by gods, a flower nurtured by demons. She couldn't deny his appeal. For a moment, she felt she understood Julian. She looked down, cutting her steak. She saw her own hands, well manicured but too thin, the blue veins visible beneath the delicate skin. In her hands, she could see what she had lost. It wasn't just time. It was the fullness of a love she once possessed. "Why are you pursuing me?" she asked. He admitted he didn't know. He had just seen her across the room, an out-of-place work of art in a loud, vulgar party. She was beautiful, elegant, and yet, she seemed to be covered in fractures. Her knife stilled. She had lost her appetite, not that she had much to begin with. She set down her fork and met his gaze. "I want to do something for you," Caleb said, his infatuation clear in his eyes. She turned her head to look out the window. Coincidentally, she saw Leo and Julian outside. The weather was still chilly. Leo wore a silver-gray fur coat, his face buried in the soft fur, holding an ice cream cone. Fearing he would get cold, Julian wrapped his own overcoat around him, warming Leo's hands with his own, even blowing on them. They were a picture of devoted affection, a perfect couple. She thought her heart would ache, but she felt nothing. The couple embracing outside, one of them was her soon-to-be husband. Caleb's expression froze. He had met her at a singles party. He clearly hadn't expected to hear this. She turned back to look at him, thinking of his earnest gaze, of Julian's once equally earnest gaze, of the perfect pair outside the window. She wanted to laugh but only managed to sigh. But soon he'll be my ex-boyfriend. She took a key card from her pocket and placed it on the table. He hadn't booked a room. She had. The card was trimmed in gold with a small diamond in the corner, signifying the presidential suite on the top floor. Caleb stared at the card, seeming to understand many things at once. There was no delight on his face, no anger. He simply stood up. His body was turned slightly toward the exit. She understood he wanted to leave. She lowered her eyes, hiding her disappointment and embarrassment. After a moment of silence, she heard footsteps. A pair of simple leather shoes appeared before her. She didn't even have to look up. Caleb knelt down, took her dangling hand, and looked up at her. "You're so cunning. When I see that look on your face, I can't deny you anything." She blinked in surprise. He stood, took the card, and pulled her from her seat. He led her quickly out of the restaurant, his back broad and strong. Her steps faltered as he pulled her into the elevator. The doors closed, and he turned to face her. His calloused fingers cupped her face. Is this revenge for his infidelity, or for you? He bent down and kissed her. His lips were hot and well-defined. She was swept into a storm, her will dissolving. She clung to his shoulders like a castaway to driftwood. She was a wave, crashing violently, only to leave a whisper of foam on an endless shore. At dawn, she awoke in Caleb's arms. Her toes were warm. She stretched a hand out from under the covers, looking at its back. The tips of her fingers glowed with a warm pink. Caleb held her from behind, nuzzling her affectionately. She stroked the back of his head. "I thought you would leave. Is that what you wanted, or not?" She turned, cupping his face, looking at his messy hair, the light stubble on his face, his young, intense, slightly drowsy eyes. It felt like 7 years ago, a bittersweet nostalgia for what had changed. "Just a little longer," she whispered, closing her eyes and offering him her lips. She had expected to run into Julian upon returning home, but he and Leo were on a spontaneous trip to Europe. As a gesture of his consideration, he had the housekeeper deliver a bouquet of flowers and a gift. She took the lilies, found a vase, and opened the gift box. It was a new custom-designed bag from a luxury brand. She tossed it to the housekeeper to put in her closet. The housekeeper looked at her, then hesitated. "Sir, did you have a pleasant evening?" He had watched her grow up and had come with her when she and Julian moved in together. He cared for her deeply, so she didn't mind his overstepping. She touched her neck, where a love bite or two likely remained. "Is it obvious?" The housekeeper shook his head. "You look radiant." "I'm relieved." Hearing his words, she looked up at him. His gaze was kind and caring. Suddenly, she realized that during the long, empty years, she had become numb to such embarrassment. She had become insensitive to pain and had lost her sharpness to care. Now, seeing his gentle eyes, a tide of bitterness flooded every crack in her body. Her eyes reddened. She smiled at him, then went upstairs. The next few days, she prepared the small villa she had lived in before moving in with Julian, planning to move back. She put Caleb out of her mind. She needed to return to her life, unwilling to pin her happiness on one or two men. She drew a strict, safe line for herself. Caleb texted to ask if she was home. She didn't reply. He called and she didn't answer. He took the hint and stopped contacting her. One Wednesday, she had an appointment with the police commissioner's wife. A mutual friend had opened an art gallery, and they had agreed to go together for support. The commissioner's wife sent a lavish row of flower baskets. Evelyn just had a few paintings delivered. Their friend showed equal delight for both gifts, but took only Evelyn's arm as they walked. She introduced the paintings in her gallery, mostly works by emerging artists. Some showed hints of genius, but few captured Evelyn's interest. The paintings were just paintings, some wild, some serene, some grand, some bright, all neatly contained within their frames. She walked through, feeling nothing. Just as she was about to buy a couple of pieces to please their friend, the commissioner's wife suddenly asked, "What perfume are you wearing today?" "Perfume? I thought it was pheromones, but you're a beta." Evelyn stopped and sniffed her wrist. Their mutual friend, an omega like the commissioner's wife and sensitive to pheromones, leaned in to sniff her neck. "The cedar," she said confidently. "Very deep." The commissioner's wife laughed. "I heard your fiancé was traveling abroad with another omega. I thought you two were having problems, but it seems it was all rumors." Evelyn smiled, maintaining her perfect facade. Their parents had pushed for her marriage to Julian, and she was keeping it from them until she could make a clean break. The commissioner's wife's smile vanished. "But isn't Julian's pheromones scent brandy?" she asked, a note of confusion in her voice. The atmosphere chilled. Their friend flinched, almost pulling her arm away, but held steady. "What nonsense are you talking about?" "I just sprayed on some cedar-scented perfume," Evelyn replied calmly. "It's a new, unreleased product from a perfume studio I recently acquired. It's called Scent Boyfriend, 12 different scents that perfectly mimic pheromones. If you're interested, I'll send you a couple of sets tomorrow." The commissioner's wife's face stiffened. "Oh, is that so?" Evelyn laughed, and they laughed with her. Suddenly, she felt weary of the pretense. She broke away from them and walked forward. A painting in a corner caught her eye. It depicted a garden where a young man sat barefoot on the grass, seemingly pulling a rose thorn from his toe. But his eyes were fixed on a fairy in the garden. The fairy was pale and nude, like a fractured porcelain figure, with rose thorns and roots spilling from the cracks. She saw the signature and the date on the painting. She stopped smiling. She looked down at her watch, then showed it to her friends. "You were right. I do have a new boyfriend. I have to go find him now." She waved goodbye, leaving them standing there with uncertain expressions. Outside the gallery, she had her driver take her to Caleb's studio, located next to his university. They drove the conspicuous luxury car into a narrow alley near the campus. Dressed in expensive clothes, she climbed the dark, damp stairs. She knocked on the peeling wooden door. Caleb appeared, sleeves rolled up, wearing a work apron, splattered with paint. He looked stunned to see her. She saw a white plastic string stretched across the door with a cardboard sign that read "Working. Please do not disturb." She broke the string and pushed him back inside, closing the door behind them. The studio was empty. As a beta, she shouldn't be affected by pheromones. But at that moment, she could have sworn she smelled the rich scent of cedar. A surge of emotion started from her toes and rushed through her. Caleb didn't dare to touch her. She took his hand and placed it on her own face. So Caleb was a painter. Her warm fingers touched the paint. The blues, reds, and greens seemed to breathe new life into her soul. Her chest was in turmoil, something sprouting from deep within. She consumed, extracted, and relied on his young, vibrant love. Caleb kissed her. "Why did you come here?" she asked him. "You want to have an exhibition?" "Yes." "And an exhibition requires a lot of paintings?" "Yes." "And a lot of models?" He held her sweat-dampened back tightly, pressing his lips to her pink earlobe. "You are my muse." She stayed with Caleb for 3 days and 2 nights. When she returned home, she was wearing his t-shirt and jeans. He was much taller than her. She had to fold the waistband of the jeans and buckle the belt on the tightest hole to keep them from falling off. She walked in carrying a painting he had made for her and saw Julian sitting in the living room. He clearly hadn't seen her like this in a long time and looked slightly surprised. She instinctively touched her collarbone, where Caleb had left a mark. "They said you have a new boyfriend. Seems it's true. Your trip is over?" She walked past him, her thighs still aching warmly. She placed the painting on a display cabinet in the living room and stepped back to admire it, catching Julian's gaze. Julian came up behind her, looking at the painting with her. "He painted this?" "Yes." "It's very good." She rarely paid attention to her own appearance, too familiar, perhaps too disappointed. In the painting, she was half reclining on a sofa, nude beneath a sheet of canvas. Her long neck rested on a feather pillow. Her hands, elegant with clear, beautiful lines, rested lightly on her abdomen and legs. Her legs were crossed, her posture relaxed and gentle. He had painted her beautifully. Her curved eyelashes, the cupid's bow of her lips, her nose like a dewdrop on her face, all beautiful. The emotion flowing from the corners of her long eyes was beautiful. He loved her. Because of him, she had grown roots from a fractured porcelain vase. She had bloomed. She turned her head. "Thank you, Julian." "Thank me for what?" His expression froze for a moment at her smile. "For giving me the chance to meet him." Julian's Adam's apple bobbed. He forced a smile. "Then can I choose my own thank you gift?" She nodded. "You can." He reached out and swept her into his arms. She was caught off guard, startled. She looked up at his firm jaw. He was carrying her towards his bedroom, a look of intrigue on his face. She understood, and yet she didn't. Why, after 2 years of not touching her, was he suddenly curious? Then she realized. He was simply reminding her that he could still control her. He placed her on the bed and loosened his tie, his eyes smoldering. She was strangely calm, wanting to see what he would do. She watched him. He was a perfect alpha, more handsome than most, the epitome of his bloodline's best traits. He was proud, radiant, a golden peacock. He could switch seamlessly between charming rogue and noble gentleman. He had been wild in his youth, growing more composed with age. Of course, she had loved him. She had had every advantage, so they had come together. Even as he shattered her, all she wanted was to remove him from her life. Julian leaned over her, his palm beside her pillow. "You seem distracted," he said in a low voice. Being so close, he saw the bite mark Caleb had left on her neck. His thumb stroked the swollen, broken skin. His expression was unreadable, as if he too were looking at a painting. "Looks like you've had a good few days. You like him a lot." She admitted it. "Yes." Julian frowned. "Because he's a painter?" "Yes. I originally wanted to go to art school, but my family made me study business administration." "Does he know we're getting married?" She smirked but didn't answer. "You might want to choose someone else. He seems very possessive." He's left a deep mark on you, Julian said flatly, his thumb pressing harder on her neck as if trying to rub the mark away. I can't smell it, but pheromones don't lie. You're a beta. He's put a lot of effort into wrapping his scent around you. Maybe it was unconscious, but he clearly wants to drive away anyone but himself. A shiver ran through her. She remembered Caleb's furrowed brow as they made love. At the time, she thought he was lost in desire. She reached out to smooth it, but he grabbed her hand, squeezing it while kissing her palm. Just as she was about to push Julian off, his phone rang. The ringtone was clearly set specifically for Leo. Julian got up without hesitation and answered. What's wrong? Something was said on the other end, and his face changed. He hung up and started for the door. Who was it? She asked, knowing the answer. Julian didn't hide it. Leo's heat has started. I have to go immediately, or he'll find someone else. She found it absurd. You haven't marked him? Julian laughed. I don't know how long my feelings for him will last. He doesn't either. I'm self-aware enough for that. This surprised her. She thought Leo was Julian's true love. Apparently not. She sighed deeply. Let's break up. You should be with Leo. Julian stopped at the door, looking displeased. I told you you're irreplaceable. Why are you jealous of him? I'll come back and explain everything properly after his heat is over. He still left, leaving her with only a flimsy promise. And strangely, she was relieved. She moved out of the home she shared with Julian, taking the housekeeper with her back to her own villa. She let herself go, appearing everywhere with Caleb. She cut back on society gatherings and started showing up on the university campus in shorts and sneakers. She would drink tea and eat burgers in Caleb's studio, wearing nothing but the paint he applied to her skin. She would also take Caleb to fancy restaurants, order him custom-tailored clothes from her designer, and introduce him to renowned artists she knew at salons. At night, they would embrace in her villa's pool. Caleb never refused her. He seemed to take all her actions in stride. But when their limbs were entwined, he would cautiously press his nose to her neck, inhaling her scent, his arms tightening around her as if trying to merge her into his own body. Sometimes she felt guilty. She couldn't give Caleb a defined relationship yet. Julian had left her exhausted and wary. She told Caleb more than once that he could leave her anytime. They say love at first sight is your gene's most loyal choice, he'd replied. That is to say, I love you based on instinct. Every cell in my body craves you. I fall for you every second. If I could leave, I would have left long ago. So please don't say such cruel things. Please hold on to me, just as if you love me too. His words were like a spell. She lost all resistance, falling deeper and deeper. Then she received a letter. It was the 100th day since she and Caleb had met. She wanted to surprise him, so she bought a lot of fine ingredients to cook for him. She grabbed 2 bottles of red wine from the cellar and saw Julian standing at her door as she was leaving. You moved back? He asked, bewildered. She was shocked. In all these weeks, he had apparently been staying with Leo, never once coming back to their old home. But that didn't matter anymore. We broke up, she stressed. I'm sorry. I came back late. I'll come back home with me. I'm not used to not seeing you at home. He was actually there to take her back. She couldn't fathom his logic. I'm busy. She had no intention of being drawn back in. Julian looked at the bags she was carrying, his expression complicated. You're going to cook for him? Yes. It's been a long time since I had your cooking. She glanced down at the bags. The prosciutto, truffles, and caviar were all things Julian was tired of. When she used to make them, he wouldn't even look at them. Let Leo cook for you. You don't like these things. Julian just stared at her, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. But compared to her years of heartache, his fleeting sadness meant nothing. He reached for her hand. She pulled it back. Leo is very well behaved. He won't compete with you for me, Julian said, still not understanding. He resentfully withdrew his hand. Most of my heart is yours. She was tired of talking to him. Come back when you've cooled down. He left. She went to the garage, put the groceries in the trunk of a modest car, and got into the driver's seat. Being with Caleb had revitalized her. She wanted to do everything herself, even drive herself. She drove to the studio. The door was open, but Caleb wasn't there. She assumed he'd be back soon and sat on the sofa to wait, eventually falling asleep. When she woke up, she was still alone. She called him. He answered, hastily explaining that his professor had dragged him to an art-related gala and he couldn't leave. She was disappointed but asked for the address. She put the groceries in the small fridge she'd bought for the studio and drove to the gala. You needed an invitation to get in. She called the organizer, who came out to greet her with a wide smile. Dressed simply, she walked through the glamorous crowd with ease. She had long since tired of such flashy events. She ignored the stares, feeling more relaxed than ever. In a corner, she saw Caleb's awkward figure. He hadn't had time to change and was being led by a short, white-haired man among a group of well-dressed, pot-bellied art dealers. He seemed to be trying not to offend his professor, forcing a smile, but his cheekbones and shoulders were unnaturally stiff. Just as she was about to walk over, someone tapped her shoulder. She turned to see Julian. What are you doing here? He was in a suit, hair slicked back, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, still the suave, arrogant, well-dressed beast. Leo, exquisitely dressed, was on his arm, looking at her thoughtfully. Behind him was another tall, handsome man who looked at her with awe. This, Julian announced, is my wife. He said it so naturally. Leo lowered his eyes. The handsome man's expression stiffened, clearly embarrassed. Julian laughed and pulled her to his side. Don't worry, it's a marriage of convenience. We do our own thing. If you want to pursue her, I don't mind. The man was speechless, his eyes darting between them. Evelyn frowned and shrugged off his hand. She looked toward Caleb. He hadn't seen her. Today was a special day, and she didn't want Julian to upset him. She gave up on approaching Caleb and took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. In front of Julian, she invited the handsome man to the garden for a chat. The man was flattered. After a few glances at Julian, he followed her. She looked back. Julian stood there, his face unreadable. In a quiet corner of the garden, she found a bench. As she sat, she noticed several couples meeting secretly nearby. A wave of melancholy washed over her. The handsome man hesitated before sitting next to her. She patted the bench and he sat. They toasted with champagne and chatted. He was, as expected, the young master of some prominent family, just back from studying abroad. He remarked that he hadn't expected the social circles here to be as messy as those overseas. She laughed. He quickly backtracked. I don't mean you're messy. You seem very nice. I am very nice, she said. She was an only child, and a beta. Many things in her life were beyond her control. She had a wilderness within her, but she had to trim it into the shape of a manicured garden. She was bound by her responsibilities, well-mannered, like a lifeless flower on a high mountain. That was why she had been so grateful when the arrogant, radiant Julian was announced as her fiancé. She had thrown herself into loving him without hesitation. But a marriage of convenience was just that. Julian would always be Julian. She had to face the reality of their relationship and bear the consequences of her choice. The man then asked if it was true about their arrangement. He was 22, a young peacock. She knew what he was asking. He was a bit like a younger, perhaps less confident Julian. Good-looking, probably a player who knew how to turn on the charm. She was about to say she already had a boyfriend but found it laughable. She had never defined her relationship with Caleb. In this seemingly open relationship, what difference did it make if she had 2 men or 3 or 4? The wind made her feel lazy, full of empty spaces. The young man leaned in, as if to kiss her. Her body was more honest than her mind. The moment his lips neared, her hand shot up to block him. He froze. "I'm sorry," she said abruptly, standing up and running back towards the banquet hall. She had to find Caleb. She suddenly understood. She had accepted Caleb simply because he was Caleb. She was panicked. She needed to see him to be sure. She ran into a hard chest. She looked up and saw Julian. He had been watching her from a distance. He saw her panicked face and instinctively grabbed her wrist. She tried to pull away. "Let me go. Let me go past you." Julian trapped her in an embrace, squeezing so tight her bones creaked. His expression was complicated, but he just patted her back, telling her to calm down. "Don't go back in." An alpha just went into rut. "It's dangerous. You can't smell it, but the hall is full of a pungent pheromone." She froze. "What scent?" "Cedar." She suddenly noticed Leo wasn't with Julian. Horrified, she threw off Julian's hands with all her might, even stomping on his foot, and ran back into the hall. It was half empty. She saw a dark mass struggling on the floor. A security guard with a riot fork tried to intervene, but the man bent the metal with one hand. Looking closer, she saw it was 2 people, Caleb and Leo. Caleb was drenched in sweat, veins popping on his forehead, clutching Leo's clothes. Leo was half draped over him, likely induced into heat by the pheromones. His neck flushed crimson, like a wilted flower pulled from water. She heard a guard, pinching his nose, say, "These pheromones are incredible." She heard another say, "Hurry, separate them." She remembered Caleb saying he loved her out of instinct, that his attraction to her was genetic. She had believed him, but what could overcome an alpha's primal urge for an omega? Her vision blurred with tears. She loved him, and in the instant she confirmed it, she shattered. In her long drought, she had developed countless cracks but had managed to hold herself together. But now she was broken. She heard a crisp sound from her chest. It had splintered into countless sharp fragments that pierced her organs, traveling through her veins with each heavy beat of her heart. Even her fingertips began to sting. She covered her eyes, tears streaming through her fingers. "No, wait," another guard said. "He's pushing the omega away." A sweaty body embraced her. She knew its heat. She knew who was holding her and felt a sense of calm. She couldn't lift her head, just sobbed. Julian ran in, covering his nose, and saw Caleb holding her tightly. She had no scent, but he buried his face in her neck, breathing greedily. "I'm sorry. I can't control it." "I'm sorry," Caleb managed to say. "Can I take you away?" "I want to take you away." "Can I?" Her answer was to wrap her arms around his neck. In front of everyone, Caleb lifted her into his arms. She could feel the controlled tremor beneath his iron-hard muscles. She didn't spare a glance for Julian. She looked up and kissed Caleb, whispering in his ear, "My car is on the left side of the parking lot." She had been through an alpha's rut before, but she was still not used to Caleb's loss of control. She couldn't respond like an omega. It felt like a sacrifice. Caleb enveloped her like a dark cloud, a dream woven from stars and moonlight. She flowed, she feared, she reveled. She merged with his love. They stayed in the car for a long time. Late at night, Caleb slept on the back seat, as peaceful as a baby. She propped herself up and drove him back to the studio, kissing his restless eyelids, wishing him sweet dreams. She returned home and ran a fever for 3 days. On the 4th day, Caleb was gone. She couldn't find him anywhere. He had vanished into thin air. First came shock, then disappointment. She hired investigators, but they found nothing. She was frantic, then had to get used to it. Julian was still around, pestering her, trying to get her to attend new parties. She met many new peacocks, but she couldn't shift her focus. In her helplessness, she would go to the studio. She had renewed the lease. The dilapidated studio was still there, the floorboards still creaking. The ink on the unfinished paintings had dried. The paint hardened into clumps she would pick at with her nails. A month later, on the studio sofa, she found the letter. There was no name. She opened it and saw a photo of Leo with his arm linked through Caleb's. They were smiling, young and innocent, standing close together. The world spun. She went to see Leo. He was waiting for her in a coffee shop. He looked gaunt. The rainy quality she had once admired was gone. She could see his pain and gloom. His eyes were shadowed, his lips chapped, his hair like dry grass. His clothes were a mess, the tags sticking out. He wasn't there to gloat. He had a secret to reveal, one that seemed to tear a sliver of life into his stagnant depression. Expecting the worst, she sat down. As he spoke in a soft voice, she sat up straight, habitually maintaining her impeccable posture and her fragile pride. As the truth slowly unfolded, a cold rage washed over her, and at the same time, she felt as if she were sinking into a swamp. Leo's face swirled and distorted in the mire. She saw his mouth open and close, but all she heard were the thick, bubbling sounds of a bog. Leo and Caleb had grown up in the same orphanage. They were childhood friends. Before any romance could blossom, Caleb encountered the art exhibition that would change his life, and Leo encountered Julian. Caleb worked odd jobs to study painting. Leo was quickly captivated by Julian's charm and, despite knowing it was wrong, ended up in his bed. Julian provided for Leo lavishly. Caleb knew nothing of this, only seeing Leo as a friend who had suddenly struck it rich. They stayed in touch. A few months ago, Leo got pregnant. When he told Julian, Julian seemed pleased and told him to have the baby, promising to arrange everything. A while later, Julian brought him to meet her and announced their open relationship. To his surprise, she didn't make things difficult for him. She sneered. "I didn't know you were pregnant. How absurd." Leo sighed. "I know he didn't tell you, but as long as you accepted the arrangement and found other partners, he would have an excuse to convince you to accept the child." So, she couldn't say the next words, feeling suffocated. She suspected Caleb had been sent by Leo to lure her, to speed up her downfall. The words were like needles in her throat. Her chest felt frozen. Leo looked at her and said earnestly, "No." He had nothing to do with it. Her body temperature shot back up, her shoulders relaxing. She noticed she had dug crescent moons into her palms. "He's not entirely innocent," Leo continued. "His face alone is enough to tempt anyone. But he's a straightforward fool. I know him. You're his type. He just paints all day. I told him he needed to meet people, find inspiration. I sent him to your friend's party. You see? Valentine's Day, the perfect time and place. He fell for you at first sight. You had him investigated. I intercepted the report and removed the parts about me. And then you got together. When he loves someone, it pours out of him. I believe no one could resist that. She took a deep breath. So that's how it was. Leo went on. Things were going smoothly until that night, when Caleb suddenly went into rut and took her from the gala. Julian found out everything and was furious. He had Caleb tied up in a suburban villa and beat him in front of Leo, telling Leo it was the price for his meddling. Julian told Caleb to find an excuse to leave her. Caleb refused. So Julian had someone break Caleb's hands. Leo regretted involving the innocent Caleb and had a huge fight with Julian, after which he was dragged away and locked up. For the next few days, Leo was left to fend for himself in the villa, forgotten by everyone. He finally managed to break a window and escape, intending to find Julian and clear things up. But outside Julian's company building, he saw Julian embracing a beautiful woman. Leo hadn't eaten in days, was thirsty and hungry, his clothes torn. The woman saw him and laughed, calling him a beggar. Julian laughed along, agreeing that he looked like a beggar who didn't know his place. Leo's expression was sorrowful. I had an abortion. She ignored his self-pity, just tightened her grip on her coffee cup. Where is he? Leo shook his head. I don't know. I reported it to the police, but it was useless. I have no sympathy for you. This is what you deserve. Yes, those who do wrong will pay the price. Leo lowered his head, his eyes flickering like a trapped animal in the night. He had been Julian's obedient omega. Perhaps he had planned all this for the child, and now he had tasted the bitter fruit. I'm leaving this place, Leo said with a bitter smile. Maybe I should never have gotten involved. She went to Julian's company and walked into the top-floor office. Julian's secretary was sitting on his desk, hooking a finger in his tie. He was whispering in her ear, a flirtatious smile on his face. Seeing Evelyn, the secretary scrambled off the desk, grabbed her heels and fled. Julian just adjusted his tie, his expression shifting back to the one she was used to. What are you doing here? She looked at his miraculously perfect face, a face that was proud, cruel, and incredibly captivating. She had loved him so much. She had rejoiced that out of all the flowers blooming for him, he had picked her, even if he only stayed for a moment before moving on. Where is he? Julian's expression faltered. What are you talking about? I know everything. He's just an ordinary college student. You broke his hands. You threw him somewhere no one can find him. I could ignore your other bastardly deeds, but I thought, at least you were a decent person, she yelled. Julian roared back. What else was I supposed to do? Let you put all your thoughts on him? Watch him steal you from me? She had never seen him so out of control. It was unbelievable. He seemed to have forgotten he was the one who proposed they see other people. He acted as if she were the betrayer. Weren't you the one who wanted to walk away from me without any burden? She asked. Julian denied it. That was a misunderstanding. You were even about to have a child. It's just a child. Playing around outside and bringing someone home are two different things. No one is more suitable for this position than you. I won't disrupt my current life. You'd better understand that soon. So you planned for me to raise your illegitimate child? It would have been under your name. Besides, you're a beta. It's hard for you to have children, isn't it? She was utterly disappointed. She took the separation agreement her lawyer had prepared from her bag and threw it on the desk. The few thin pages hit the table with the heavy sound of metal. Julian looked at the papers, then at her, his composure finally cracking. All our prenuptial assets are in there. There won't be any postnuptial assets either. The houses, cars, shops, it's all sorted out. I'll talk to our parents. Let's break up. Just for that, Caleb? No, it's because the sight of you makes me sick. Julian picked up the agreement and tore it into pieces without looking. Then he lunged across the desk and grabbed her by the collar, forcing her against him. He gritted his teeth. Have you forgotten? Our relationship is essentially a business merger. It's not something you can just walk away from. The moment we break up, vultures will descend, spreading or fabricating countless negative stories. Our family's reputations will plummet, and our business partnerships will suffer. You don't want to cause trouble for your family, do you? I've already announced to the media that I'm single again. If they're interested, they'll be here soon. So you'd better release who you need to release right now. Otherwise, I'll make this even messier. She didn't back down. His face contorted, veins popping on his forehead. He was frustrated, desperate, and furious. Throw your tantrum. I won't break up with you. No matter how big a scene you make, I'll have someone suppress it. You're insane. A knock on the door came just in time. Julian let her go and told his secretary to come in. The secretary informed them that a crowd of reporters had gathered downstairs. Evelyn gave him a cold smile. Julian took out his phone and made a video call. On the screen, she saw Caleb, hands tied, blindfolded, thrown in a dilapidated shack. Tears welled up in her eyes. I can let you see him like this all the time. I can send him back to you piece by piece. You'd better think carefully about what you're going to say to the reporters. At this point, Julian had lost all semblance of decency. She realized how selfish he was. He only wanted to maintain his current life. He might have feelings for her, but he only loved himself. He would never break up with her. He put his arm around her as they went downstairs to face the reporters. With a perfect smile, she told them it was all a misunderstanding, that their relationship was stable. She kissed his cheek. Her lips were ice cold, malice seeping from her pores. She whispered in his ear, venom dripping from her tongue, I'm pregnant. Julian's face changed. He couldn't show his anger in front of the press, only tightening his grip on her waist. If you dare to touch him or this child, for every day I live, I will find a way to destroy us both. She smiled sweetly. The reporters thought they were whispering sweet nothings and cooed in admiration. Julian held her as they posed for photos. You insist on this madness? You like being a cuckold so much? Then enjoy it. Julian released Caleb but had him confined to an orphanage abroad. In exchange, they got engaged. A few months later, the child was born. Evelyn gave the baby her last name. Julian told the media he respected his partner's rights and had no objections. She and the child lived in her private villa. She doted on the child, pouring all her attention into him. She would write to Caleb, sending him photos of the baby. Caleb recovered from his injuries with no lasting effects and spent his days painting. Occasionally, he would send her paintings of small flowers and plants. Life wasn't particularly miserable. The people around Julian were always changing, but she no longer cared. Those who do wrong will pay the price. She believed that. Soon, Julian's reckoning came. The next time she saw him, it was in the ICU. He had contracted a severe, unmentionable disease from his affairs and was terminally ill. His parents asked her to see him one last time. He lay on the bed wearing an oxygen mask. His once vibrant face was ashen. His body withered to a skeleton. He seemed to lack the strength to even turn his head, just half opening his eyes to look at her. She propped up his head, adjusting his pillow so he faced her. A tear suddenly wet the corner of his eye. He had never known failure in his life and was now in a pathetic state. His former grace gone, replaced by a foul smell. "I didn't want you to see this," he whispered. "I have no sympathy for you. This is what you deserve. Will you go to him?" "Yes." "You should go now." "I'll wait. It won't be long now anyway." They fell silent. Julian seemed to gather some strength and slowly turned his head to look at the ceiling. "Do you remember the night we decided to be together?" she asked. He remembered. It was a terrible party. He was perhaps resentful, had too much to drink, and passed out on a garden bench, his clothes disheveled, a woman's lipstick on his face. She had come out for some air and, worried he would catch a cold, covered him with her coat and sat beside him. The moonlight was beautiful. She looked at her future husband's face, her heart pounding uncontrollably. Soon, he woke up, blinked at her, and then smiled, saying her heartbeat was too loud. Then he fell asleep again on her. "I waited for him. I kept waiting," she said calmly. "I don't remember." Julian blinked slowly. "The moon was beautiful that night. I looked at you. The tip of your nose was red. It was cute. I had even thought of names for our future children then." A strange light shone on his face, as if life had briefly returned to him. He reached a hand toward the air. She followed his gaze to the ceiling. She didn't know what he was trying to grab, but his face was filled with happiness. Perhaps he had caught what he most wanted. A dream. "I just forgot later." His hand fell to the bed. The heart monitor flatlined. Her eyes stung, and she quickly looked down. The door opened, and his family and nurses rushed in. She couldn't hear what they were saying. She stared at the floor, covered in water spots of various sizes. Her wait was over. A month later, she and her child boarded a plane to a small town in France. She didn't tell Caleb she was coming. When she arrived at the orphanage, he was still painting in an empty classroom. She pushed open the door and stepped into a riot of color. She had been anxious, afraid he would resent her, that after so long apart, their feelings would have faded, leaving only awkwardness. But standing in the doorway, she saw the room was filled with portraits of every style. She recognized the person in the paintings. The curved eyelashes, the cupid's bow lips, the dewdrop nose, the long neck. She recognized the gentle posture, the canvas below, the sofa, and the vines and roots sprouting from the cracks at her fingertips. "Daddy," her child said, pulling on her hand, "is that you?" "Yes." Hundreds of paintings, all of her. The person painting in the corner heard her child's voice and suddenly straightened up, turning his head. She saw the chiseled features, the distinct brows, the lake blue eyes. She saw him smile. He stood up and rushed towards her, pulling her into his arms. His arm was tight around the back of her neck. She could feel his excited but restrained muscles. She hugged him back. With those paintings, he had filled the years that had separated them. It felt as if she had just left the studio for a moment and nothing had changed. "You're back." Caleb felt the warmth on his shoulder, lifted his head, and cupped her wet face. He wiped away her tears with his thumb, his gaze tender. "What's wrong?" "I just discovered my muse is such an ugly crier. How am I supposed to paint for the rest of my life?" She laughed through her tears. "You'll just have to bear with it." They kissed, and she melted into his arms. Their child frowned at their passionate embrace, covered his eyes, and turned to look out the window. Through the cracks in his fingers, he saw the warm sun, the green grass, the chirping birds, and the flower petals dancing in the wind. Spring had come.